Welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre looking for the best of fun escapist books. Today we're doing a science fiction called Fallen Angels by several authors, Larry Niven, Jerry Pournelle, and Michael Flynn. They collaborated to make it's a humorous sci-fi. It's certainly meant to be, maybe ironic, maybe satire. So the science fiction idea, this is a dystopian science fiction. It's future, but not too far in the future. This was written in the 90s, probably 1990, and it takes place in 2040 or something like that, which in our day is not too far in the future, but for them it was far in the future enough to get away with some of the sci-fi stuff, but not so far that you have Star Trek level. So, okay, what you have is the Earth is experiencing an ice age, a dystopian disaster, basically, in the future, but it's right after humanity has just barely gotten some long-term living stations up in outer space orbiting Earth, some longer-term habitations. So they've gotten some up in the air, and they basically barely get a bunch of humans up into it, and then the space program shuts down. We'll talk about why in a bit, but it shuts down. So the people up in the heavens are considered by some of the people down on Earth angels, which is where you get the fallen angels title from. So you have people up in the habitations in space. They're very divorced from Earth. They're not getting supplies from Earth. If they come to Earth, people will try and shoot them down out of the sky. So that's kind of what's going on. You have two pilots who get in a ship to go and scoop air out of the Earth's atmosphere because the habitation needs the air, okay? Even as recyclable, as compact, as airtight as they can get it, some air molecules keep escaping and they need more. So they go down to scoop up oxygen and nitrogen and whatever else is in the atmosphere, and doing so, Earth shoots them down. They land in maybe North Dakota area, not still in the US, but not, maybe it was South Dakota. Anyway, northern hemisphere. Well, this is an ice age, so the glaciers have basically been moving hugely quickly south. So Canada is a complete ice field, and northern USA is starting to become a huge ice field, and they land on the ice field. Okay, the US government wants to hunt them down to re-educate our fallen angels. But there are some people that still want to help. So they go and rescue them, and most of the book, so the fall to Earth and then is just like the first chapter or two. After that, it is them being helped by the people that rescue them and hidden from the government and trying to return. Various ideas to get them back up into space when there is no space program, and that it's illegal to have a space anything. In fact, technology is pretty much forbidden for the most part. I mean, the government still has some things, but it's slowly being phased out. People are reverting back to horse and buggy kind of level of going backward in technology. Okay, so that's kind of our plot. So some things I like. I do like the humor in this. For the most part, it's pretty, you can tell it's tongue-in-cheek. So as an example of this, our rescuers are sci-fi fans. The authors are writing to their audience. They're like, you are our heroes. I found that kind of funny. They intentionally do that, you can tell. It's not anybody with any skills or anything. There's not superheroes. They're just sci-fi fans and as such really pro-technology. In a world that, generally speaking, you can go to a re-education camp if you are pro-technology, or you express that kind of view. So it's kind of dangerous. So they're the outlaws, the sci-fi people. So that's kind of funny. They also have some irony going on here. So our big Ice Age disaster, this is a natural disaster, and the way that this is put in this book is that it's kind of man-made. And they say, one of their sentences on page 59 is, the biggest environmental disaster in human history was caused by the environmentalists. So yes, the way this book is set up is the environmentalists, in their effort to protect the environment, caused an environmental disaster. Which again, there's that irony going on there and humor going on there, kind of poking fun. It's satire in the sense that, it's really poking at anti-technology and hyper-environmentalist people. So those are the people that it's kind of making fun of. And that can be very humorous because that's almost a sacred cow. People don't write too much where the environmentalists are the bad guys today. But that happens to be in this book. So that's I found it amusing. Some other people might not. I liked the unique perspective of our main character, who is one of the pilots that came down. So he is used to he's lived pretty much, not quite, but almost his whole life in free fall, because they don't have artificial gravity. This is, again, it's supposed to be semi-realistic as far as technological levels when this was written, like things that the authors thought, give it a decade or two and we could be able to do that. And artificial gravity was not available. They have a little bit of it from spinning, but it's not Earth-level gravity. In any case, he comes to Earth and he's lying back on this iceberg that he landed on, he's just lying there and thinking it's very, very, almost nauseatingly disorienting, because visually he doesn't look like he's moving, but the force of gravity pressing him down, to him it feels like he should be accelerating up. To him, that's what gravity felt like, an acceleration. So anytime he's moving forward, at some point later, like somebody helps him move, because he's not used to gravity. He can't stand up and walk immediately. He has to be pushed, basically, and pushed or carried or something like that. Anyway, he's basically he's going to get motion sick because it's just so weird. So I like that. It felt like a very thoughtful, realistic portrayal of somebody who'd been in outer space for quite a while and then being on Earth and dealing with, mostly it deals with gravity, not as much of other health issues that would come about that people are discovering, like eye issues or something like that. It doesn't get in there, just into how gravity affects people. It also had a very thoughtful, interesting kind of some take on what people in outer space, if they were living there for, we'll just say 40 years, what it is that they would start running out of, even at hyper-realistic, or hyper-recycling. Like, for example, there were hypodermic needles, so medical needles to give people vaccinations. They start getting dull, and so they hurt more. You can still use them, but you can't sharpen a needle very well. So things like that, just little things. Their tomatoes started not being edible. They started making people sick. So they can still use them for fertilizer and for recycling the oxygen and carbon dioxide, but they can't use them to eat anymore until they get some new tomato seeds. Things like that. That's interesting to think about on how things can go. So I liked that about this book a lot, some of the actual hard science going on that they did in that. There isn't very much of that in this, but it is there, and when it does come up, I liked it. I did like the, let's say, the political relatability of elites in the government forbidding the masses something, in this case technology, but allowing themselves to keep using it. So, for example, the masses cannot have access to phones unless they have a dispensation from the government, but the government people can have a phone. Or they can't have access to a computer, but the government can organize their data. Things like that. That sounded very relatable on how government politicians work. Not for thee, but for me kind of attitude, which I thought was funny. Okay, some things I didn't like. So this book does not have any romance, but it does have a lot of nudity and sexual situations. So nothing explicit unless you want to talk about, a bunch of people dancing around in the nude, but not anything that I would think would be inappropriate for a young adult in this respect. But I didn't necessarily like the way the authors handled it. It was very loose about sex. Again, they talk about, wife sharing, and they talk about multiple people getting together, and they talk about, very loose women, let's say. It wasn't, I didn't like that. I also didn't like when it did come to romance. Like I said, there's no romance in the book, but several people do get together in the end of the book. And it ends up being like one couple, super sudden. Like he knows her one day and he's gonna like change his whole life for her or something like that. And it was just a little weird. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way the authors handled it. This was definitely not their, romance is not their genre. That's fine. I just didn't like it. Okay, another thing I didn't like, there are a lot of made-up words and acronyms in this. And it isn't a case, I didn't think, of like acronyms like military. Like sometimes the military has a whole bunch of acronyms and somebody who's not in the military just isn't familiar with it. In this case, it was more like they made up a whole bunch of acronyms. So some saying that's in the sci-fi convention is shortened down to an acronym and then they use it a couple times. I'm like, what even is this? Am I supposed to memorize this acronym that I don't know anything about and remember it many chapters later? I'm just not going to do that, generally speaking. So they had too many made up words, like fen all the time, and they never define what the fen is. You kind of understand later that it's the fandom, except they also call them fans. And so I'm like, what is up with the fen that's different than a fan? I don't know. So they had things like that it was one of those things where it looks like the author thinks that language would evolve, which it does. It comes up with new words all the time, but then didn't do a very good job, I thought, of bringing you, the reader, into that new whole bunch of language terms that you're not familiar with that are weird. At the beginning, it's a lot heavier because one of our main characters speaks Russian, so has a bunch of Russian words. It's just, yeah. Too many made-up words, too many acronyms. I didn't like that. Our main character, I did not feel was likable. I did not... this is the kind of main character that he doesn't come across as, like, bad. It's just he's self-centered, he's not compassionate, he's kind of insensitive, especially to his fellow fallen angel. I felt like I couldn't relate to his attitude, his choices a lot of the times, and I just didn't like him as a person, which is unfortunate because if you're going to follow him throughout the whole book. But if they had done a sequel, I wouldn't be interested in following these characters. They're just not interesting, likable, relatable enough to want to follow. So I didn't like that. People. There's a lot of people in this. A lot of people that come in and it seems like they should be in for a short time and then they pop up again way later in the book without a reintroduction. Like, who is this character again? There are a lot of fans, sci-fi fans, that they feel interchangeable, like they're not individual enough, or they come in really briefly and have this long description about how this person really likes wearing mermaid outfits and has a mermaid tail, and okay, you get this big long thing and then they never come up again. Just things like that. Character stuff wasn't great. This is not a character-driven book. This is a plot-driven book. It feels like it could be offensive and preachy if somebody is pro-environmentalism. I am not. It didn't really bother me, but I think somebody who is strong enough environmentalist would probably find this kind of on the verge of too much, because it talks about, it's very anti-environmentalist in its sermonizing on what science actually has to say about things, and some of it's very interesting, maybe educational. Maybe somebody who's really into that would look at it and go, okay, do they actually have a point on some of their ideas? I don't know, but I think some people would get offended. So be aware. Overall, I'm going to give this an okay. It was entertaining read, sort of, right on the verge. It's a 3-star type of book. But not something I'd go out of my way to recommend to anybody. Really, it's not bad enough for me to say don't read it, but I just, it was okay. So, too bad. I think it had a unique premise. I think it spent, it didn't feel very sci-fi-y. It felt more like, almost like a zombie apocalypse type of thing, much more so than any kind of space thing, because they spend so much time on Earth hiding and going from place to place and trying to not be seen and going through desolate cities and, tribes of people in Chicago that have divided up the city, and this is my little territory and I'm the head chief of this territory, and, things like that. It feels kind of more dystopian. But not a really fun in a lot of respects. I don't know. I just didn't really love it. So yeah, that's my review on that one. Thank you for watching, and I hope you join me next time.